Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On a beautiful evening tonight, I welcome everyone who's here and whoever's watching. Thankfully, we can resume having the flag raising ceremony, which unfortunately, because of COVID, the past couple of years we didn't have. But welcome back, and on a beautiful night. What can I say? Before anything, I think right now, let's have Mark Lieberman is going to sing the national anthems for us, both the American and the Israeli.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Oh, Lord, believe of Penima, Nefesh Yehudi, Hoy Miyah, Ulefatei Mizrach Kadima, Ayin Letzion Sophia, Od loved Atikvateinu, Atikva vashnos apayim, Liosam chofshi be'artzeinu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim, Liosam chofshi be'artzeinu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
Thank you very much. As you know, last week the world observed the Holocaust Remembrance Week. But of course, that's one day that could be observed any day of the year, and probably should be done more often, because we can never. There's two phrases that we must remember: never forget, and we remember. Seems kind of ironic, but those two are applicable. Now, and coincidentally, today in Israel is the 74th anniversary of the birth of the nation of Israel. It's since 1948. So we celebrate that too. And in a few moments, we will have the raising of the flag. I want to thank all those who helped make this program, from the mayor's office, the mayor, Lizette, and others in the mayor's office, And I also welcome Council President Patrick for attending, and all those who are here, and all those if they're watching. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce Mayor Hawakaba to say a few words.
Thank you, Herschel. And to me, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. We need to make sure, like you mentioned, that we never forget. And this is an important day, or every day, to let the public know, every year, that you know what, we cannot repeat the tragedy that happened in the past. So we need to make sure that the younger generations understand our history and understand about the Holocaust. And this is why we're doing this. And to me, it's an honor to be here with each and every one of you to make sure that we continue to make this an awareness day for the city of Perth Amboy. City of Perth Amboy is the beauty of our city. It's our diversity, and we celebrate all cultures in our city, but especially an occasion like today. Once again, we need to make sure that we educate not only the public but the younger generation. So that's why it's a special day. We need to make sure that we continue this every year. And I wanted to present a proclamation to our guest speaker. He's a Holocaust survivor, Eugene Yanni Halper. But I know he's running late, but we want to continue with the program. And to me, it's an honor to present this mayoral proclamation, Holocaust Remembrance Day, whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic persecution and destruction of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945. 6 million were murdered. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and whereas Remembrance Day, also known as Yom HaShoah in Hebrew, memorializes the victims of the Holocaust as well as reflect on the terrible events that occur. And therefore I, Helmut J. Kaba, Mayor of the City of Perth Amboy, do hereby recognize today, 5th of May, as Israeli Independence Day and the Day of Remembrance in memory of the victims of the Holocaust and in honor of the survivors as well as the rescuers and liberators, and further proclaim that we, as citizens of the City of Perth Amboy, should work to promote human dignity and remain vigilant against hatred, persecution, and tyranny. Congratulations, Herschel, and if I'm going to provide this to you, and that way, I'm not sure if Eugene would make it on time, but if you could present this to him. But once again, you could definitely count on me as Mayor of the City of Perth Amboy that we're going to continue this tradition. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, people ask, why do we need to have this day, Remembrance Day? But the fact is, if you look at what's been going on, That's the reason why we need to keep remembering. The Holocaust sort of never ends because tragedies and tragedies come, and just the other day, the foreign minister of Russia, of all nations, is saying that Hitler was Jewish and things like that, idiotic. Where I just read that even Putin, who the head of Russia, had to apologize for what his foreign minister said, which means there's still a lot of teaching that needs to be done, and this day, like other tragedies like that we observe in America and all around the world, needs to be taught in all the schools, taught everywhere, because that's you can never stop learning. And let's hope that one day maybe we won't need it, but I think it's going to be a long time before that day unfortunately comes. Ready?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. All right. Oh, you got the light? Now, something as we wait for the speaker setting up, we now will have the lighting of the 12 candles. And the reason why we have 12 is for the 6 million Jews and 6 for the other millions and millions of people that died during the war. So, if you don't mind, we will have the lighting right over there.
Mashiach ani mamin v'yaf al pi she'yismameya im kol zeh ani mamin ani mamin ani mamin ani Shlema, Memuna Shlema, Vivias HaMashiach, Vivias HaMashiach ani mamin, V'yaf al pi she'yismameya im kol zeh ani mamin.
Okay, right now I'm going to introduce the gentleman who will be introducing the speaker, Heshi Rubenstein, who's been helping him out for many years. And a few years ago, his own father spoke, gave a beautiful lecture. And Heshi, without Heshi, I don't know what we'd do. This week was a funny week. It took us hours and hours till we finally got. And from the bottom of my heart, I really thank Heshi. And Heshi will now introduce our speaker, Mr. Halpert.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It is my honor to be here today at the City Hall Park of Perth Amboy, New Jersey. I'm not new over here. Heschel knows me for about the past 7 or 8 years. I have been providing the beautiful city of Perth Amboy on this Holocaust Remembrance Day with a Holocaust speaker. First of all, a really special thanks to the Honorable Mayor of Perth Amboy, New Jersey, for hosting this event. The Jewish nation worldwide would appreciate, and I'm sure even the non-Jewish population worldwide would appreciate events like this. It is events like this that educates our youth, our generations, young and old, against hate. What hate can cause. Can cause death, destruction, and hurt, and pain, and so on. Just today, a few hours ago, a deadly attack in Israel. Just today, in Brooklyn, where I'm from, hate graffiti with swastikas at the city bus stop and so on, which is being investigated right now. So here we're standing today. Yesterday was May 4th. My parents are both Holocaust survivors. My dad should be healthy till 120. Yesterday, May 4th, was the day of his liberation. He was liberated in a camp, Gunskirchen, where people were just left to die. No food, no water, nothing. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, he survived, and he was liberated by the American Army, by the 71st Infantry Division. God bless America. Religions throughout, everywhere, have their holidays. And people wish one another happy holiday, whichever holiday it is. We just had Passover, happy Easter, happy holidays. On this day, we cannot really say happy Holocaust Remembrance Day. But what we could say is happy Holocaust Survivors Day. We have here a survivor, and he won, like all the other survivors. He won. He is here today to tell the world, to tell those cameras, wherever it will be published, for the world to see and to know. We did survive. Unfortunately, 6 million did not survive, but they are remembered here today, and we shall never forget them. And now we will hear an amazing story of the survivor. He was only a young child, and how vividly he remembers every detail of the Holocaust, what he went through, and he survived. Baruch Hashem. Thank God. Thank you. Mr. Eugene Yanni Halpert.
Before I begin my story, let me give you an overview of the town where I was born. I was born in Bardia, Slovakia, which is northeast Slovakia on the border of Poland to the north, and Ukraine to the east, and Hungary to the south. I have some statistics over here from Bardia's history. In 1921, there was 6,593 population of Bardias. Out of 6,593, there was 2,206 Jewish people. In 1930, there was 7,730 people in Bardias. Out of 7,730, there was 2,264 Jewish people. In 1940, Bardia's population was 8,508 people and 2,441 Jewish people. Now skip to 1945, after the war. There was 6,572 population, and from 2,441 Jewish people, only 256 survived. And I'm one of the 256. So here's my story as I recall it, as I remember it. My first recollection of the something is not going. I was born in 1937, and the war started in 1939. But the Germans didn't occupy my city Bardiev until about 1942. So my first recollection of the Holocaust was that it was something not exactly kosher with the adults. They were like very uneasy, but I was too young to understand what's happening. My first recollection is when I looked out the window and I saw white chalk on the sidewalk, and there was swastikas and Jewish stars, and the word Židi do Palestini, Jews to Palestine. Jews go to Palestine. It's ironic. Now the one is out of Palestine, that time the one in Palestine. So the Jews can never do anything right, according to the anti-Semites. That's beside the story. Now here's the story where I begin, how it began with me. My father had a store, a general store, and it was about 2 or 3 houses away from the city hall and the police headquarters. And my father was a good chess player, and the chief of police, name was Adam Bomba. He was also a chess player. So whenever he had a chance to sneak out of the police station, he would come into my father's store and would play chess in the back of the office. So they became friendly. But beside that, Adam Bomba was a friendly person to everybody, including the Jews. So the Germans came into our town in 1942, and they started deporting the Jews. In 1942, the first transport were about 1,000 people in cattle car. They rounded up. Out of the 1,000 people, there was 100 people from our town that also were rounded up to go to Auschwitz. But my family and 20 other families, they got it called a Vinyam card. They got an exemption because we were. My father had a general store, and there were grocery stores. People had a lumber yard. All the Jewish families who had businesses that were beneficial to support the Gestapo and the German army, they were issued an exemption. So even though they deported most of the Jewish people, but the 20 family, that we were part of 20 family, we remained there. And I was always afraid, I was always hungry, but I have 3 incidents that I really was afraid that sort of stick out in my mind. I'm going to tell you my personal story. About 1944, this is when my really story began, that I was aware of the Holocaust. 1944, I was about 6, 7 years old. They canceled all the exemptions from everybody. The Germans realized that they were going to lose the war, so they got from the headquarters, from the Gestapo headquarters, they got an order not to transport any more Jewish people to the concentration camp, but as soon as you see Jewish people, shoot them on the site. So Adam Bomba sent a message to my father, and the Gestapo could not operate without the local police, because the local police knew where everybody lived, where every Jew lived, whatever. So the Gestapo had to work in conjunction with the local police. So Gestapo gave the notice to the Adam Bomba that 20 families will be deported tomorrow. And part of the 20 families was my family. So this police chief, Adam Bomba, sent a message to my father. His name was Pinchas. Pinchas, you better disappear, because if I find you tomorrow here at 8 o'clock, I'm going to have no choice but to deport you. So my father got the message, and we were in the store, and that was about in the afternoon, and he wanted to leave the store right away, but he saw the Gestapo outside, and they knew who my father was. So he came back running into the store, and with the people in the store, and my father had to hide someplace. So we had like a cabinets that we would hide all the fixtures, with glass fixtures. So he put them in there. And and the Gestapo came to my father's store to look for my father. So my mother decided to put me in front of the cabinet. They figured a young boy, they wouldn't bother looking at them. So they came in. The Gestapo always had German shepherds with them. I remember the gray uniform, the black boots, and the like the insignias over here. It's vivid in my mind. They're very scary. They were very scary. And always with the German shepherds. And he came over, and my father I was standing here, and my father was like up in the cabinet here. So German came over to me. He said to me, "Void am Vater." I understood what he said because void am Vater is very similar to Jewish "Vid am Futter." So you don't have to be a genius to understand what he said. So I really was afraid. I was 6 years old, but I'm not sure if I was more afraid of the German or the German Shepherd. I don't know who I was afraid I was, but I had to say something. I decided to say in Slovak, "Ja nie rozumiem." I don't know what he's saying. I knew exactly what he was saying. And he said to me again, "Void am Vater." And I don't know how I did it to this day. I looked him in the face and I said to him, "Ja nie rozumiem." I don't understand. He said, "Ah, you dummkopf," and he went away. So that was my first scary moment about the Germans. So in other words, next day, that night, my father decided to take my mother. We lived together with my mother, my sister, and my grandmother and my father. We were 5 people altogether. So we had to leave the house because if we stood in the house till the next day, they would have to deport us to Auschwitz. So the question was, where do we go at night? It was a small town, where do we go? So out of the 20 families, there was a family called Elephant. They all survived. He was a dentist, and he also had an exemption. And his Vinyamka exemption did not expire yet. So about 12 o'clock at night, he woke me up. He said, "Get dressed." I said, "Where are we going?" "Don't ask any questions, get dressed." So I got dressed and we went to the Elephants. And somehow at night, nobody saw us, and we hid in the attic. But this was not the solution. We couldn't stay there forever. I remember it was very hot. It must have been about August. It was very, very hot. It was August 1945, probably. We was in the attic for about 2 weeks. It was unbearably hot. It was like a tin attic, and there was no air there. But we had to slide. They gave us some food every day. They brought us up food. It was pretty well-concealed attic. But my father had to make arrangements how to get out of there and go west to a town called Liptovsky Svatý Mikuláš. Liptovsky Svatý Mikuláš was like we have over here the Rocky Mountains. In Slovakia, you have the Tatry Mountains. So we knew if we could reach the mountains over there, we can hide in the mountains in a bunker, and they wouldn't find us so quickly. So my father was pretty clever. He was always one step ahead of the Gestapo. So anyway, how he made the arrangements, I have no idea. But after 2 weeks up in the attic, at night, again, he woke up the whole family, my grandmother, my sister, and my mother, 5 of us. And there was a horse wagon waiting for us downstairs. And we had to make our way west to the sort of rocky Tatry Mountains. And it's only about 90 miles from Bardia, from my town, west to the Liptovsky Mikuláš. But 90 miles at that time was like now 5,000 miles. There was no roads. There was only horse and wagons. There was no cars. The roads were primitive. So we couldn't travel more than 5-6 miles a day. So it took us about maybe 2 months to get to maybe a month or so. What I'm talking about right now must have been about August, September. So I think in September, so we started going up to the west, to the hiding place. Now, the thing is that Slovakia basically was a very peaceful country. Before the Germans came in, the Jews and Gentiles lived in harmony together very well. There was very little anti-Semitism. It wasn't like Poland or Ukraine. Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, at that time was Czechoslovakia. In general, was every Jew and some Gentile, we did business together. So my father had a store, and at that time, when in Europe, 70, 80 years ago, There's no such thing as factory. You couldn't call up a factory, send me a dozen shirts, send me 20 shirts, send me a dozen shoes. All the farmers, the peasants throughout the small towns, to supplement their living, they had a sewing machine and they would make whatever they could, whatever the skill was, to some with shirts, to some with sweaters, some with blankets, and they would sell it to the people in the city, to the merchants. So my father had contact with these farmers in the smaller town, and he made contact with each farmer that if we get there, they can put us up. Now, I have to mention also that these farmers were Gentile people, and they took their life in their hand, because if the Gestapo would have found them, they would have probably, I don't know what they would have done to them. They would maybe shot them or put them in a concentration camp. So they took their life in their hands. I mean, I give credit to these Gentile people who saved our lives. So we traveled, until we got to these Rocky Mountains, we probably made about 10 different stops in smaller towns. Now, each stop that we made had a story by itself. One story, we were always afraid, but the Gestapo were all around us. So once we got to a certain town, we made sure that we were not together, so we separated. My father went here, my mother here, my sister there, and we wound up to meet in the house. I came in the front way, my grandmother came in the back way, make sure that we were not visible together as a group. So each town we were had different stories. I was born in the city, so I was never on a farm. My first recollection is I was fascinated. I was on a farm when I saw the pigs, the way the pigs were eating, and I couldn't get over how they eat it with gusto. I couldn't stop. I was a kid, but I couldn't stop to watch the pigs, how they were eating. It was like a novelty to me. And the chickens and the pig and the cows, whatever it is. So to me, basically, was an adventure. So anyway, to make a long story short, it took us about a month to get to the town called Liptovsky Mikuláš. Liptovsky Mikuláš was on the bottom of, let's say, it's similar to, like over here we had Rocky Mountain, similar to Vail. It was like a town that was down and up there, and on the bottom of the Tatry Mountain, which are very rocky mountains, and we got our way there. From there, that was our last stop before we were able to somehow. They tried to figure out how to make an underground bunker so we can hide from the Germans, because that was ready in. We were liberated in March 1945, so this must have been about February or January 1945 or so. So we got to this town called Ondrashova, which was right on the bottom of the mountain. And my father, so we had, on the way there, we met about another 5 or 6 families who also had the same idea we had, that their exemption expired and they were going west to the Tatry Mountains to hide. So by the time we got to the last town of Ondrashova, which was on the bottom of the mountain, we had about 20 or 30 Jewish people that we had to hide in the bunker. So the way they had no equipment to dig a hole in the mountains. How do you put 20, 25 people in one place in a bunker, small room, and live together? We had no idea how long we were going to be there. But it's going to be a month, a week, a day. We had no idea how long. So my father and this guy, Moshe Zucker, another fellow friend, they decided to hire some people, tell them a story that they were smuggling in a ton of potatoes, and they needed a big hole to hide the potatoes. So they were digging a hole of potatoes, and once they dig a potato, we're going to give them potatoes. They'll have plenty of potatoes to eat. So that's how they started to dig a bunker. So they dug a bunker, and finally the bunker was finished. So the families that were living with the Gentile people, we all started leaving. And the Gentiles said, listen, it's getting very dangerous. You have to leave here because the neighbors are getting very suspicious. They were afraid that they're going to tell the Gestapo and we're all going to be shot. So we had to leave the towns immediately. So as soon as the bunker was even halfway finished, it was very primitive. So we started going to the bunker. But I was the youngest one because I was 1940. That was in 1945, so I was only about 44. I was only 7 years old. So they were afraid to take me to the bunker because they were afraid that I would start crying and I would give up the hiding place. So my father agreed that he left me with the Gentile family, and they went to the bunker. So my whole family and all the 20, 30 people, Jewish people, they all went to the bunker. I was the only one left in the town under Ashova with the Gentile family. I got to say, I had it pretty good over there. I had a lot to eat. I mean, they treated me very well. I have no complaints. But then the owner, the man, somehow he got the message to my father. The people are getting very suspicious of who I am, and he's afraid that that somebody is going to be suspicious, and the Gestapo is going to get me. So my father sent somebody down, another person, and with the objection of other people, they allowed me to be in the bunker. But luckily, I was very quiet. By that time, I was pretty hardened. I already knew what to expect. I was pretty hardened. So there was no problem with me being there. Okay, now comes the rough part. How do you put 20, 30 people into an underground hole and be able to live in harmony? I mean, you can imagine a family of 3, 4 people living, and there's one bathroom, and there's arguments in the morning. So you have 30 people in one confined room. So we had to devise a system how to live, but we had no idea how long we were going to be there. We had no idea what's happening outside, how the war is going. There was no radios. We were completely isolated. We had no idea what's happening in the outside world. So we decided that there was a bunker. I'm not even sure how big the bunker was. Maybe as big as this, you know. So we put like a board on one side and a board on the other side, so that men slept on the board on one side, but nobody ever got undressed. We all slept in our clothing, and the woman slept on the other side. But somehow we survived the bunker. The biggest problem was that we had some food, mainly vegetables and potatoes, and once in a while, the men went downstairs to the town, and they were able to meet other men, and they bought a chicken once in a while. But the biggest problem was when we had to divide the food every morning, the portion. So everybody was very careful that the other person shouldn't get more. So every morning it was like a tragedy comedy. There were arguments every morning until we decided who was going to get what food. Somehow we survived. We made it somehow. And so we were in the bunker there. Luckily, that no Germans ever found our bunker, because if the Germans would have found our bunker, because not the Germans, but the Wehrmacht, they were not concerned too much with the Jewish people, with the Gestapo and the SS men. The Wehrmacht was the army, and the Gestapo and the SS, they were exclusively ordered to kill all the Jews no matter what. At that time, Hitler didn't care if he's going to lose the war or win. His main objective was to kill as many Jews as possible. For whatever reason, this is what hate does to you. In other words, a country like Germany, such a cultured country, to be able to instill such a hate, this is what, the Romans said, hate is very contagious. So we had no idea how long we were going to be there. So at that time already, he came, and what I was going to say, we came there, and so there was a few bunkers there. In this area, there was maybe 2 or 3 different bunkers. So the Germans happened to find one bunker, and they lined everybody up. And that time was already about March or so. It was always snowing in the mountain. It was about 2 or 3 feet of snow. So one bunker, we found out later on what happened. They lined up all the people, and they shot all the people. Somehow one person, a Rabbi Weinberger, he survived. And he was able to find our bunker, and he came to us, and knocked on the doors, and we were very afraid, who was dead. I said, don't worry. He said, I'm one of you. I'm a Jewish person. I survived the bunker. So they killed all his family, and we took him into our bunker. It's a good thing we took him because he brought in some spirit. He was a rabbi. He was able to sing with us every Friday night. When the Shabbat came, when the Sabbath came, he was able to sing with us, and he gave us some, some encouragement to go on. So it's a good thing that we took him in. And somehow we were never found out by the Germans, but the Russian patrol found us. And Russian patrol, one of the soldiers was grazed by a bullet to the cheek. And my mother and another lady, they were very good at first aid. So they were able to treat the wound. So they treated us very well. And they kept us informed what's happening. So that was maybe about two weeks after they found us in the bunker. They came to us and they said, listen, we're going to give you 24 hours and you have to leave this bunker, because we were in the middle of the Russians were on one side, the German on the other side. And the Russians were going to make a major offensive against the Russians. He said, if you're going to stay here, we're going to bomb the place. Nobody will be survived. We're going to hold off the bombing 24 hours. We give you 24 hours to leave the bunker. So this is where really panic struck everybody. We had no place, nowhere where to go. We had no idea what's happening in the outside world. We had no idea that there was how many people survived, how many people from their family survived, how many this and that. So we had no idea. So each man was for himself. This is the second time where I was really, really afraid, because we had to leave. And it was so we were about 20, 30 people, and that time, when this happens to you, it's each man for himself. So each family gathered whatever belongings we had, which wasn't much, a pillow or this and that, a blanket, and we started going. And my family happened to be with my father, me, my sister, and my grandmother. So the Russians told us in the lift of Skimikulash, when you make it down to the mountain, you got to go over three mountains, and the Americans are there already. Once you get to that town, the Americans will take care of you. So we had to go. One person knew how to get to the town, so we had to follow that person. But my family had a problem because my grandmother was 65 years old. At that time, 65 was considered an old person already. It wasn't 65 right now, middle-aged. But at that time, 65, you would come, you would hardly walk. So we started going, but my sister and my mother and my grandmother kept on falling behind. And my father and me, we kept on with the people. And my father looked back and he saw he didn't see my mother and my sister, my grandmother. So he said there was a little hut over there. I remember a little hut. It must have been like an abandoned bunker also, or abandoned, whatever it was. Says to me, you wait here. I'm going to go back to see where our mother and my grandmother is. I'll be back in half an hour. This must have been about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it's getting dark. I see my father's not back. So that's second time when I really, really got scared. Really, I was like, I was 7 years old in the mountain by myself. There was always gunshots in the back, because the war, the front already started. There was cannon shot, bullet shot, rifle shots. They were not near us, but they were, like in the distance. We knew there was fire. So that's why I was scared. So he went back, but he couldn't find my sister and my grandmother and my mother. So then he wanted to come back to find me. But in the mountains, when it's snowing, you get disoriented very quickly. So he couldn't find me either. So finally, somehow, but luckily, he said I have no idea what time. I know it was dark already. It could have been 8 o'clock, could have been midnight. I have no idea what time it was. Somehow he found me. So, lucky I found you. You found me. So let's make our way back. We had an idea what direction we have to go. We have to go down. We have to go south and down to the town. Okay, but that was our story. But meantime, my sister And my mother and her mother, they went through a rough time because my grandmother said to my mother, listen, I can't go on. You go save your life. Leave me here. I'll be okay. It was in winter time. It was like, it was already April. It was March already, but it was still winter snowing. And my mother, a daughter doesn't leave a mother just like this laying on the snow. It's very difficult. My mother refused to. I wasn't there. I was told by my sister afterwards. So she refused to leave my grandmother. But my grandmother and sister, you go, save your daughter. That's your responsibility. I had a good life. Don't worry about me. I'll make it. But the fact is that she knew she wouldn't make it. Because once you fall asleep in the cold, you fall asleep and you never wake up again. So after a while, they were all night, my sister and my mother, they were nudging each other. They shouldn't fall asleep because they knew if they fell asleep also, they also wouldn't survive. The bottom line is in the morning, they realized that my grandmother was already gone, so they had no choice but to leave her here. But this had an impact on my mother. She was never the same afterwards. The guilt, she passed away, she lived in 94, but she was never the same. Every day she talked about, how did I leave? She couldn't believe how she left her mother there. People tried to console her, listen, you had no other choice, but I'm just trying to tell you about my mother's case because many people that survived the Holocaust went through these kind of cases. Luckily, in my situation, I was too young to have any kind of guilt feeling because I was 6 years old. What could I have done? So this type of emotional feeling did not affect me, but it affected most of the adult people because they always blamed themselves. Oh, I could have done more. I could have done more. So they blamed themselves. So then finally, my father and I got to this town where the Americans were already occupied. We found the Americans, and it was a big gymnasium, and they started putting different people, different towns, and different. So let's say we came in, and the American soldier asked, "Where are you from?" I said, "Bardia." So we already had a section from our town, Bardia. And another side story, one of the soldiers, American soldier, he must have, I did not know what he said, he must say, "Hey, chick," and he gave me a chiclet and a Tootsie Roll. That was my first introduction to American food, chiclets and Tootsie Roll. That chiclet, I think, lasted me for about 6 months. I couldn't spill out. I put it behind my ear when I went to bed. I couldn't part with the chiclets. So it lasted me. I thought American, that's all you have is here, chiclets and Tootsie Roll. That was American diet. So that was it. So that's the second thing that I remember vividly was when we got to the gymnasium where they had all the people from different towns, and we came, you had to say what town you were, and they tried to put us together. The wailing of the people, because we had no idea what was going on. We had no idea that 6 million people died, that they killed some, but 90% of their families didn't survive. Like my mother had, she was part of 8. She had 6 brothers and 1 sister, and only her and another brother survived. And this happened to almost 90% of the families. And we got to the gymnasium, everybody was looking forward. Where's my father? Where's my brother? But unfortunately, nobody came. Nobody, was very few people. Then they realized they're just not coming. They're not going to be here. So this was a very, very traumatic. The wailing and the crying, when they began to realize the enormity of the Holocaust, began to realize what really happened. Until then, we had no idea because we were isolated. So then somehow the Americans, we got an American truck and took us back to our town at Bardios. Now we got back to our town, it must have been about that time, Passover was March 23rd, March 29th was Passover. So we got to our town before Passover, about 2 weeks. So we were able to bake matzah, but we had no wine to drink the full wine. So we made a Seder on milk. And there's maybe about already 10 families began to trickle back in. So we had about 30, 40 people with a communion Seder. And then slowly but surely more people came in. So out of 2,441 people, only 244 survived. And then we lived there from 1945 till 1949. And in 1949, everybody left to Israel or to the United States. So this is basically my story. And like I said before, God bless the United States of America, because this is a country which really is freedom, and we don't appreciate it. Only people like me who really appreciate it, who really knows what what hate can bring. How hate is like a disease. So you gotta take the hate and you gotta nip it in the bud. As soon as you see it, you can't ignore it. You gotta face it and you gotta nip it in the bud. So thank you for listening. That's my story. Thank you very much.
Yanni, an amazing story, and we're grateful to have you here today with us. And before you, earlier in the program, I presented a mayoral proclamation, and it's an honor to present this proclamation to you in honor of the Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Take it.
Absolutely, if you're going to come here.
Hi everybody, I did not prepare, but our Perth Amboy chaplain called me and asked me to come speak for him. He said he couldn't make it here today. He asked me just to say a few words, and as I look around today, you could just, you just hear the stories of what happened in the past, and you see how far we have come. On the other hand, we still see how much work there is to do. And I'm a guest in the city of Perth Amboy, but I can see how much the city of Perth Amboy is inclusive to all different types, and you can see that this is a great place for the Jewish people. As there has been many years ago, it's been a very large community, and while the community is not as large as it used to be, you could still see the opening, the open arms that they have for the city. So we have to take this opportunity to say, never forget, and keep on looking at the future. So thank you to Mayor Kaba and the entire city of Perth Amboy.
Before we conclude, I just have one memorial song that Mati will sing, memorial prayer for those who perished during the Holocaust.
Kedoshim utehorim kezoyar arakia masirim nes nishmos achinu b'nei Yisrael kedoshim Kedoshim Atiorim Sheneheregu שנשחטו ושנשרפו על קידוש השם בעבור שאנחנו נודרים צדקה בעד הזכורוס נשמעסיהם בגן עדן תהיה מנוחסם לכן פל הרחמים יסתירם בססר כנפיו לעולמים בצרור החיים אס נשמעסיהם אדוני ונחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם ונאמר אמן.
I want to thank everyone who participated, to those who are here or who are watching. Again, thanks to the mayor, councilman, all those who helped prepare this. And thank God, thank America, of course, thank the country of Israel, and thank God we live in a community like Perth Amboy, who, as the mayor beautifully stated, we have many different cultures, and thank God we could all live in peace, and not just in peace, we're actually friends. So we need to share the love and not the hate. So thank you again, and have a good evening, and thank you very much.